I think I always said on the north side of Florida that that was God's country, but I'm wrong. I think that God stopped here first. I was a hospital foreman in the United States Navy, stationed at the Bethesda Naval Hospital in 1963. I was attending medical technology school. When we found out, though, that Friday that the president had been, first we found out he had been wounded. And that was about 1 o'clock, 1:30, something like that. And then we found out he had passed away. Now, what they did with us that day is they discharged all the classes. They told everybody that didn't have their duty to go home, and the people that had duty to go to the duty stations. Well, I had duty that Friday night, and so I went to my duty station, which was the morgue. The reason I was in the morgue, I was rotating through the pathology department. And so my partner and I went to the morgue, not knowing that we were going to see somebody very important come in that night. A little bit later, Admiral James Galloway, who was a commanding officer of the whole Naval Hospital Command, came in and told us that we were now confined to the morgue. We were going to have a very important visitor coming in that night. And so then we knew we were going to receive the body of the president. Now, what I want to do right now is the autopsy team had never been able to get together for 29 years. Last year we were able to get together. I'm going to show you a short film, and what it is, this film was made to promote a book called Best Evidence. And what the author did is he got none of us together, but all of us separately, and filmed us. And you'll find out that the similarities of what we saw. So if you go ahead and roll that, and we'll watch about 30 minutes of this, okay?
Paul, do you mind if this is on?
Sure.
Do you mind if the video is on? Do you mind if the video is on while the film is on? Okay. If I ask him.
You, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the small undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
Friendly crowd in downtown Dallas, and the first red lights are now visible coming far down the street, just having now turned right hand onto Main off of Harwood. I was on Dillon Freeway earlier, and even the freeway was jam-packed with spectators waiting to dance to see the president as he made his way towards the trade park. there were people running up the hill alongside Elm Street, there by the Dillon Freeway. Several police officers are rushing up the hill at this time. Stand by just a moment, please. The hands are shooting. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound. And the first unconfirmed reports say the president was hit in the head. That's an unconfirmed report that the president was hit in the head. President Kennedy has been assassinated. It's official now. The president is dead. The president of the United States is dead.
Hello, I'm David Lifton. In 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated, I was a graduate student at UCLA and working nights on the Apollo space program. I admired President Kennedy a great deal and was proud to be part of his effort to put a man on the moon. In the fall of 1964, the special commission appointed by President Lyndon Johnson and headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren released a report of its findings on the Kennedy assassination, the Warren Report. I studied that report, focusing on an exhibit to be found in Volume 18, black and white frames of the home movie film taken by Abraham Zapruder, some of which were published in color in Life magazine. Those frames contain startling information. They show that in response to the fatal shot, President Kennedy's head was thrust backwards, violently backwards. As a graduate of Cornell University with a degree in engineering physics, this backward motion seemed hard evidence to me that President Kennedy was shot from the front. And that wasn't the only evidence. 2/3 of the witnesses thought he'd been shot from the front. And most important of all, when the president was brought to Parkland Memorial Hospital minutes after the shooting, the doctors and nurses there thought he'd been shot from the front. The Warren Commission concluded otherwise, that the president was shot from behind. What about the head snap? It was never mentioned. What about the witnesses? They were wrong. They heard echoes. And what about the Dallas doctors? They too were simply wrong. But I couldn't accept this. It all seemed too improbable. And yet, a Warren Commission attorney told me that in order to believe that President Kennedy was shot from the front, you had to believe the 2 Navy autopsy doctors who had testified before the commission had lied under oath. That too seemed improbable. And so I struggled with a contradiction. Which evidence to believe? The Dallas evidence, which seemed to indicate that President Kennedy was struck from the front, or the government conclusion, backed by the Bethesda autopsy, that the president was struck from behind. Both couldn't be correct, or so it seemed. And then I thought of a possibility nobody had addressed, that nobody was lying, that everybody was telling the truth, but that somebody had altered the body. That's right, there had been surgery on the body prior to the autopsy, not clinical surgery to save the president's life, but post-mortem surgery to remove bullets and alter wounds. If true, the doctors didn't lie to the investigators, the body lied to the doctors. The body is evidence, the best evidence, and this post-mortem surgery is a crime. At the very least, it's an obstruction of justice. At worst, it's part of a conspiracy to take the president's life and then falsify the facts about his death. This illicit surgery is the central thesis of my book, Best Evidence. It took 15 years to research and write, and was published in January 1981. The film you're about to see was produced about 3 months earlier, in October 1980. Its purpose was to get the key witnesses on camera before they themselves realized the full implication of the information they possessed. The film deals with a single issue, the interception and the alteration of President Kennedy's body prior to autopsy. And the story begins in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, at Parkland Memorial Hospital. At 1 p.m. in Parkland Hospital, President Kennedy was pronounced dead. His body was returned to Air Force One and flown to Washington. 6 hours after the shooting, an autopsy was performed at Bethesda Naval Hospital in the morgue of the U.S. Navy Medical School, where Dennis David was chief of the day. 17 years later, Dennis David, now a food company executive in Hoopeston, Illinois, is talking about what he saw that night. Are you scared?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I would have been, I know that for a number of years afterwards I was afraid to say anything about what I saw that night.
So you tell me then that if I had had this conversation with you in 1964 or 5, and I told you this or showed you these pictures and we went into the implications of the sequence that you witnessed, that you would be more frightened?
In 1964 or 65, I wouldn't even have talked to you.
Dennis David is one of several people who are now talking talking to me about what they saw that day. I spoke with the funeral attendant who placed the president's body in its casket in Dallas, the Bethesda medical technician who removed the body from its casket in the autopsy room, and the x-ray technician who participated in the autopsy. What these men say now about what they saw then casts doubt on the official version of the events that day, because all these men provide new information about the most important evidence in the case, President Kennedy's body. In any shooting, the autopsy report, which describes the body, is used to determine the facts of the case. The Warren Commission, therefore, relied on the way the body looked at the time of the autopsy in Bethesda to reach its conclusions about what happened in Dallas. But the standard legal procedure didn't work this time. And in my book, Best Evidence, I explain why the autopsy failed to reveal the truth about Dallas. Between the Dallas shooting and the Bethesda autopsy, 6 hours later, President Kennedy's body was secretly removed from the casket. It was then surgically changed. Wounds were altered. Bullets were removed. The body was returned in time for the autopsy, returned as a medical forgery which told a false story of the shooting. And here is evidence that the body was indeed surgically changed. This is the FBI report written by the two agents who actually attended the autopsy. James Siebert and Francis O'Neill wrote that when the body was removed from the casket, it was, quote, apparent that a tracheotomy had been performed, as well as surgery of the head area, namely in the top of the skull. In fact, no surgery of the head was performed in Dallas, only a tracheotomy. So if this FBI report is correct, someone must have had access to the body before it reached Bethesda, and my witnesses indicate someone did. I've traced the journey of the body, beginning with Aubrey Reich. That afternoon, he worked for the O'Neill Funeral Home in Dallas. Now he's a sergeant with the Highland Park, Texas Police.
I helped put President Kennedy's body in a bronze ceremonial casket on November 22nd, 1963, at Park Memorial Hospital.
That evening at approximately 8 o'clock, the body arrived in a gray metal casket.
In Bethesda, Paul O'Connor was a medical technician.